Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. I mean, like, really, really excited because it's one thing to have an event, right? Even spectacle, a gallery show, art fairs, so forth and so on. But when you have a space where people are able to really sit down or stand up, whatever have you, and really communicate and congregate around art, and also acquiring it and learning and being open, I think is really important. And so, Whitney, congratulations and your team, and thank you for bringing me here. So let's hop right into it. So the name of, or the title of my talk today is Rock the Dot, investing in your art collection at any level and who to buy now. And I really thought about this in the sense of like, there's so many different campaigns, rock the vote, do this, do that. There's all these calls to action. But I think that there's something that's being left out of the conversation of acquiring art, and that's just really making it manageable on how someone can start their collection or build it from wherever they are, and making it an approachable conversation. So throughout this talk, I'll go back and forth. Again, it's really meant to be more conversational, and considering we're in such an intimate setting, don't feel afraid to, like, if you have a question or a comment or a note, just raise your hand or something. I'm pretty sure, it's nice to hear me talk, but I love to hear you talk too. And I'll also share a little bit about some artists that I know, and so you'll see some images of those throughout. Some of them I'll name, some of them I'll just say look them up. So we'll start with Jasmine Morel. Jasmine Morel, she lives in New York by way of Detroit. She's a really great artist that I enjoy. I've had her in a couple of shows as a curator, so make sure you check her out. So I just wanted to start with this stat. I won't have too many, but I did want to note this. In 2007, Swan Auction Galleries in New York became the first auction house to create a department of African American art, and in February sold a 1944 modernist oil by Harlem Renaissance artist Aaron Douglas for $600,000. And this was in 2008. This is when this quote came out in Forbes. And I thought it was really interesting because I just knew that there had to be an auction house that was selling like officially African American art before 2007, because that was like, just over 10 years ago? But it wasn't. So if you could think about it from that point prior, just however far you want to go back, how was the market? Were people not purchasing African American art or African art? Of course not. Of course they were buying it. People were buying it, but they weren't necessarily buying it from this auction house. So if they sold that one piece for $600,000 in the February after they opened that department, how much money do you think was lost in potential profit prior to that point? A whole lot. So the most important thing I like to say is to start where you are. I remember before I considered myself to be a collector, I wouldn't use that word. I would say I have artwork, I have some stuff, but I wouldn't say I'm a collector, because a collector has to know a ton of things about art. They have to have really expensive pieces. There's a certain prestige. They have to know this, they have to know that. And I didn't really know any of those things, or I didn't associate myself with that particular group of people. And what I realized at some point was that it wasn't that I wasn't a collector. It was more so that my understanding of what an art collector was had been really overcomplicated and colonized. And what I mean by that is that it was this whole idea that in order for me to be a collector, considered a serious collector, I had to in some way reflect either fiscally or aesthetically the institutions that I considered to be high art, right? I had to really be able to understand those spaces. I had to be able to look inside those spaces and see a part of myself. And at the time when I first started purchasing art, I didn't. There's been a new wave of leadership, I would say globally, particularly in the United States, when it comes to leaderships in arts-based institutions and organizations. And it's more reflective of the populations that they serve, I would like to say, particularly in the areas where I live or have lived. As you heard Whitney say, I recently just moved from Chicago, where I lived for 11 years. Before that, I was in both Houston and New York. Houston is where I'm from, and now I live in Austin, Texas. And so if you've been paying attention to the institutions, the art markets there, whether it's Art Institute of Chicago or, different museums or wherever it is, you will see that there's been a changing in tide, as far as like leadership, more women, more people of color, and more explorations in the spectrum of gender, and when it pertains to positions of leadership. So starting where you are, meditation on that. So how many of you here consider yourselves to be art collectors already? Okay, great. Hands high. It's fun, right? Okay. How many of you work in progress, like thinking about it? Right on, cool. All right, cool. You never stop. So this is like pretty much me, where I started. This is in a hut, pretty much really literally was a hut on the beach of Dakar, Senegal. And, that's where I got this ring, coincidence. So I was walking up the beach and I went to Dakar I started going almost 10 years ago. And a big part of it was because I had these really great friends that were from there that knew so much. They knew like 5, 7 languages apiece, and they always had these really cool textiles or these little knickknacks at home. And I always wondered, like, where'd you get this from? And, or jewelry. And they're like, oh yeah, home, or oh my aunt, or oh my mom, or, whatever. And so I said one day I was gonna go visit. So I had the opportunity, and blew me away. And this was before the really big, boom of West African art hit the market. And I remember just sitting on this like wooden dugout bed and thinking, I wish I had enough money to ship all this stuff back home. And I didn't, but I was able to experience it, and I took a book home, and we'll talk about that. So these are some keynotes. I won't have, like I said, I don't have a lot of text, but I just wanted to run through a couple of things that you hear me talk about. But again, if you need me to, go back over these things, I'll let you know. So a couple of key points. When you're talking about collecting, I always say prep for the journey, but pack light. So you hear a lot of people that say, do your research, do your research, do your research, right? Yeah, do your research, but also allow yourself to be open. I would say one of the things that can be most cumbersome and overwhelming is to fill your head all the way with someone else's ideas or perspective of what's valuable. Where can we see that being a possible mistake that's happened in modern and contemporary society? So another part of it is that, it leaves space for you to shape your own collecting style, right? You get to decide, do you like photography? Do you want to do like films? Are you interested in more archive and memorabilia? Are you into oils? Are you into limited editions? Are you into work by women or children or people from a certain area? Yeah, so again, do your research, but at the same time, allow yourself to be open and fluid in certain points so you can kind of like teach yourself. Reach out to the arts community. I mean, you already are doing that. This is a huge part of it. Beyond this conference, beyond this fair, beyond these talks, beyond these walls, there is a plethora, just from last night. I arrived last night, and it was so wonderful to walk in and everyone just being open and talking about their art and bourbon and and just really being engaged about, just their lives, and tomorrow I'm going to go to the Brooks Museum and, a couple other places. And so just, whether it's, and it's not necessarily, looking to people who you think are complete like authorities. It's not necessarily looking vertically all the time, although you shouldn't be afraid to do so, right? I mean, what's to stop you from sending an email to the chief curator or curatorial assistant at a gallery or museum in your city and saying, hey, do you have time or coffee or chat or whatever? I wanted to talk a little bit more about, your exhibition that you just, installed. You may be surprised. They may actually have time. They may be interested. Maybe they don't, but it doesn't matter. They're not gonna blow up your computer because you sent them an email. Talk to other collectors, talk to curators. So many curators in the world right now, especially now. And I would say even educators, arts educators, other artists, so the world is literally your oyster. You have the University of Memphis and beyond at your fingertips. at the low and reasonable cost of free 99 and the time that you make available. So do that. Ask a preteen. How many of you have teenagers or have had a teenager in the past? So I have a preteen. She's 12. Nothing impressed her, but so I started taking her to art shows when she was a baby, like kids, and I have a 4-year-old too. And literally, when she was in a carrier, I remember taking her to like, different music festivals and art. I've been working, in music and art for a while, so ask them, like really, because I found that like some of my friends that are colleagues that are doing really well in the art world. I remember taking my daughter. She was like 5 or 6 to their shows, and they'd be like, so what do you think? And I'll never forget, it was like this really, prestigious artist, and they just wanted to, it was like, so what do you think of this artwork? We're at Art Basel, this, that, and the other, and she just looks and she goes, and I was like, no, but at the same time, I was like, but yeah, do studio visits, get to know artists. I mean, in a given, even if it's a solo show, I mean, how many visual artists do we have in the group right now? Like who actually, okay, great. So you know this, that what people see in group shows or solo exhibitions is about, just give me a number, anybody. What's a fraction of what you think is in your studio compared to what you actually show with everyone? Exactly. So there's a whole lot of artwork that never sees the light of day, or may have only been seen once or a couple of years ago, or maybe, some future forward work that's a one-off that may not be a part of an exhibition. Some of my best, like, favorite work that's in my collection is stuff that's only been shown like in one show or has never been in a show at all. Because before I became a curator or anything, I obsessively would go to art studios because I wanted to see what they were up to next. Little did I know that was a really good strategy for finding out who was going to appreciate and value, because I started finding out who was going to be in art fairs for the first time, who was going to a biennial, who was their next group show, collaboration. That was, one of the best parts. If you need a payment plan, make it a habit to get to know the artists and support them, cool. So you like the artwork, sure, fine. When I say get to know them, I don't mean just like messaging them all the time and then trying to get a discount. I mean like really like actually getting to know the artists and showing up, from time to time, just making it a fluid part of who you are. You will start to align yourself with great works of art and the relationships that'll help you acquire them. You need a payment plan, ask for one. Default setting, a lot of times for me when I first started, because I would see multiple pieces of art at the same time that I wanted, and I couldn't get them all at once. So I would figure it out, just be consistent and honor your stuff, whatever. You keep a good reputation within a circle of artists. If you are on payment plans and you pay them, then it's highly probable that if you need to do it again, and it may be an artist that you don't know. And if you paid off this is what happened to me once. There was an artist that I didn't know very well, and I was on a payment plan, I think for like 6 months for one artist. I paid them, whatever, we did our business. And when it came time, I was so nervous, even me, to ask. It's like, oh man, they're in like museums and stuff like that. And the artist put in word for me and like vouched for me that, I was a good, collector or contact, and I was able to get a piece of art, with a reasonable down payment, and now it's mine. Document your purchases, we'll go into that. Receipts and certificates of authenticity. Don't just buy something because you'll think you'll flip it. I know that people are really excited to talk about like art like it's Bitcoin. It's not. So, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, there are instances where like there is art that I have that is appreciated over 300% in value within the past 3 years. That's true, but I actually don't have any intention on selling it anytime soon. So it's really more of legacy. It's more about the story. It's more the relationship. The energy is more kinetic. But, if you're going to buy for the sake of investment, that's fine. But I wouldn't say that be your only intention unless you work or you have a pool of money that you're using specifically for that. And then building your own archive. Again, keeping record programs. I have like, not just because my name in it, I have like 4 or 5 of these because I'm not kidding. You want to talk about collecting different ways of looking at it? When I go home, I'm gonna find a frame that fits this. Because in a couple of years, and I mean in a few years, you'll be looking at this poster and be like, wow, I was there. You know, you might even want to get her to sign it. I might. So you're laughing, but I'm serious. So Amanda Williams, Chicago, Illinois. Nature's Intent, the Dreamy Creamy Crack House. So their work, this is a photograph, obviously, but what I had as part of my exhibition, Abandoned Margins Policing the Black Female Body, is actually the modular installation behind them. And all of those creamy crack boxes were hand screen printed. So it was pretty awesome. So I would say the next thing is like aligning and exploring. Like, why collect? You know, what's collectible art anyway? Anyone, let's get 3 answers. Why do you collect? Just throw it out there. You. Okay, supporting art? Because you like it, right? Because you love it. Want my kids to love it? Right, feeds your soul. I feel like all of that, those are more than valid reasons. And again, we need to uncomplicate that whole notion of like, you need to have some sort of like, you know, what do you call it? I don't know. You need to have a dissertation as to why you're collecting a piece of art. I think if you really love it, you like it, you want your kids to love it, it makes you feel good, it looks good on your wall, you know, you wish you did it, you know, it inspires you, you know, whatever, it annoys your spouse. I mean, whatever it is that you chose to get that work of art, you know, go for it. And what is collectible art anyway? You know, there's a lot of people that would say a lot of different things, but there's a couple of reasons why people collect art. A lot of people collect it for themselves, you know, which are all of these things we were talking about, kind of like self and other, these reasons that you all gave. And then there's like investment, and then there's collecting for clients. So what is collectible art? It really depends, right? Because, you know, this chair, we don't consider it, could we consider it a work of art yet? Possibly. Maybe, you know, it's design. But if I sat in this chair and someone took a photo of me, you know, and that became part of an exhibition, does this object now become a collectible piece of work? So, you know, it moves, you know, it's ephemeral, but, you know. Marcus Leslie, watercolor. So Marcus Leslie, he is in New York as well. He's one of my favorite new watercolor artists. I had him in a show named Gateway. Check him out, young guy. Nikia Brown, know her. Lamont Hamilton, this is from his project, DAP Line. And so he has this whole exhibition where he explores DAP culture in Vietnam, where blacks use like hand signals and greetings, you know, to show alliances, and how a lot of those origins were during wartime, which I didn't know, and I thought it was so exciting. And so I own one of his poster or like print pieces, as well as a series of some other photographs that he doesn't do anymore. Yay me. But I highly recommend collecting him too. Yeah, so I was really late and I didn't get this one. And this is a collage. And she is based in Chicago. And Gallerina 19 is, are you familiar with Martha Wade? And yeah, so, you know, Gallery 19. So Risha Williams is her gallery partner, and this is her collage work. So all of these, one of the things I've been lucky enough to like, we've shown together and everything like that. Each of these, she duplicates the same image over and over again in different sections, and then like collages them in tiny pieces. It's so meticulous and ridiculous that I have to love her for it. Sam Kirk, Chicago, Illinois. One of the main things for people to know is that you don't have to know everything. They don't either. And that's one of those really important facts to know because, you know, again, going back to, you know, getting comfortable and not feeling intimidated, you don't have to feel like you need to know, you don't need to know everything because it's not really that important. I saw this at a Namdi Gallery in Detroit, and I was just like, man, I can't believe I didn't do that myself. So part of the exploration, this is again, me and Dakar, there's an art village there, and that is not a statue, that is actually my friend Sassy. On the other side, she's so beautiful. And so she took me to this art village, and we got to meet a bunch of different artists. They took over a space that was previously abandoned. A lot of them were over 50. which was pretty cool. A lot of the artists were over 50. And so we went door to door to door to door with no appointment and just kind of like, so what you doing? What you doing? And of course I was, they were gracious and cool, and I didn't bother them for too long because they were over 50 and they didn't care that I was that curious. But, I think, I was genuinely interested. And so that became part of my independent study. And you'll hear me talk about West Africa a lot because I absolutely love Dakar and all the art that's in there. And if you've never been, I highly recommend you going to the biennial that's this year. If you can't go this year, go next time. If you can't go to the biennial, just go anytime and buy art and meet people and eat food. They have Nutella milkshakes there. So part of the education, again, in Chicago, I'm part of this group called Diaspora Rhythms. And it's a collectives group. You learn a lot. It's pretty cool. I'm going to go through. I realize I'm taking a long time. So Brandon Bro, he's in Chicago. Check him out. He did all the album covers for Chance the Rapper, but he's really amazing, in his own right. He also does video. If you are familiar, I don't know if any of you heard of this series called What's Good that launched through PBS. Have you heard of it? He did that. So we did a talk at the Apple Store in Chicago. It is so good. If you have kids, even for yourself, because it's not really for kids, but kids would love it, just look it up. It's an educational thing that fuses STEAM or whatever have you. It's called What's Good. It's based in, it's available online. So a couple of things to consider when you're talking about an artist to collect. There's commissioned artists, there's emerging artists, and there's established artists. I'm keeping it simple, but obviously there are subsets of each of these categories. One of the things that you want to think about is the work original? And that's another talk, and we could have that conversation one-on-one or another time. But there's a spectrum of the idea of original or the truth of original. Is the artist getting noticed? Again, subjective. Noticed by whom and how you deem that to be valuable. Is the artist good at self-promotion? Who are others promoting them? I know really great artists, really reputable artists, really collectible artists that are awful at promoting themselves, but everyone else loves them. So that has value too. Why are you considering this work of art? Going back to our interests earlier. And do you like it? Because you'll be living with it every day, okay? So, if you're buying something and you don't really like it, or maybe something that has a powerful emotion, like things that are in my house, I have some work that I collect that I don't hang. And that's because I just don't want to look at it. There's certain emotions or certain feelings, especially when things are figurative. There's certain things that I don't want to have in certain parts of my house. So say, for example, in my bedroom, I only have one figurative piece of artwork, like truly figurative piece, and that may even change, but it's from an artist I really, really like, and conceptually or whatever. So if I'm gonna wake up in the morning, first thing I see is gonna have to be something I really, really enjoy or evokes an emotion that I want to enjoy. So saw this one again in Namdi. So really, really cool thing about some of this work, Colleen Smith, reading 3.0, I believe this was at the Art Institute. I literally reached out to Colleen and I was like, can I get one of these pieces? I want one, blah, blah, blah. She's like, yeah, I collected, bought all of them and donated them to the museum. And I was like, and because you know what it was? The reason why I was kicking myself is because I'd known her long enough to where when I knew that she was doing this show, I should have did a studio visit, and I should have got one before they hung the show, and I didn't. So I'm going to tell you about these lessons I learned. Shoshana Weinberger, what's your origin story? Everyone has different ones, right? So really quickly, anyone, what was your origin story of engaging art? Like maybe it was your first gallery or your parent was an artist. Like, what's your origin story? Anyone? Grandmother was an artist. What about you? Your sister's a collector. Okay. Anyone else?
I have people in my family that have kind of mental health issues, behavioral health issues, and art was their outlet. So from a very early age, I didn't even know there was anything different between me and them. But I got into art that way first.
Okay.
Saw how it connected and drove, and then extremely gifted and just started getting my first work soon.
Nice. And for me, it was like, it was church, interestingly enough, when I thought about it later on, which was very, I guess, atypical way to get interested in art, was because I remember at my church when I was a kid that the pastor, like this is like so many eons ago, I haven't been there in forever, but I remember that the pastor used to go to places like Africa, or they would do this or they would do that. And what they would do is that they would buy a piece of art each year at one of those places, and they would bring it back and frame it really nice and install it in the hallway, and they would dedicate it to the church. It would be the pastor and his wife. And I always thought it was so cool because every year there was another piece of artwork. And so 10 years go by, and there's these really great artworks from, Africa and Israel and Egypt, Morocco, these places I hadn't been yet. But I didn't really understand it. Now I understand now what it meant to dedicate it to the congregation and make it, as opposed to having it in their home, having it available, and get me being comfortable and walking the wall, seeing this artwork in a place that I was very comfortable in, outside of, before I even really visited on my own outside of a field trip, a museum. And so that was really, my origin story. And then I just started thinking about all the art and prints that my mom had around the house. So these are my girls, mini tribal darlings. These are old pictures. They're way too cool for school now. That's Maya, that's Italy. This was Italy's first acquisition. She had $10 whole, and she bought this work on cardboard as part of a fundraiser from artist Matt Greer, who's that guy. Obviously, she was super happy, which was like super cool. But it was a really good feeling as a parent to like be like, here you go, you decide, where this goes, and then you tell the artist that you want it, and then you do whatever. So now she's a pro. And then she ended up also being part of the show, and that was her little work on cardboard, the Chicago skyline. And so she made her a little sale, and that was pretty cool. So that was a good family moment. Delphine Diallo, New York by way of Senegal. Independent study is key. Again, you'll hear me talk about a lot of different, stories and situations and things like that, because collecting is really that fluid. It's really that organic. It's not us sitting here going, so, and then today we're going to talk about collecting. Point 1, 5, 6, 7, no. So, it really is a nice mix of both us communicating, you figuring out, any of you know about tumbled stones, like gemstones? Ever heard of tumbled stones? So how they're made, are you familiar with how they're made? Yeah, so they take you say it. You say it.
The wrong rock, you put it in like a tumbler with a different aggregate,
Mm-hmm.
and the longer it goes, the smoother they get.
Right. So think about collecting and the education around collecting like that. You have all of these different artists and these ideas and community and people, and you put them all in this space, which is your mind, your heart, whatever you decide, and you allow it to shape who you are as a collector. It'll knock the rough edges away, and that happens over time. It doesn't happen immediately. It reveals itself. But in the most immediate, these are a couple of areas that I really think that everyone should engage. So, a couple of things. Art.Black, Taylor, Jessica, really great stories, really great women. Art critics, there's not enough out there anymore, especially ones that focus on artwork of color, from artists of color. And so Art.Black is a great platform that does that. A few books that have come out in recent years. There's so many, but I'm going to highlight two. One of them, actually both of them, I'm slightly biased, but also objective. Dandelion, Chantrell Lewis, based in Philadelphia. Who's heard about like her recent news? Recent news with Chantrell. You did? What's her recent news? Yes, so Viola Davis is producing a TV show based upon the exhibition that she curated, Dandelion, that debuted in Chicago, Illinois at the Museum of Contemporary Photography. So it's really great. Check that out. I do have that book. And then who's heard of this book? Go get this book. Go on your phone right now. And not just because I'm in it, but this is like legitimately like one of the hottest books out there right now. Like, it was crowdfunded. The women in it are from, some people that you may not know very well, to Jasmine, to Ming Smith, to, I mean, it goes on and on and on. This is a really beautiful book for yourself as a gift, but it's highly educational when you're talking about women of color in photography, women from the diaspora, and I would definitely check that out. Art Fair's catalog. You talked about Art Basel, all that other stuff. What I will say about Art Basel is this: it's a tool. It is not an end-all, be-all. No fair is, especially considering they're just a megalopolis of social events that are attached to all of them. So however you're going to do, your fair hustle, just make sure that it's in a space where you manage your own expectations and give yourself a break, because there's a such thing as a heart headache. I've experienced it a couple of times. And you can't do it all in one day or one sitting or 1 month or 1 year. So be patient. Jerome's work, he's so amazing. Red Hook. Sadie Woods, based in Chicago. She is a soundscape artist, and she has a series of music boxes that she creates that there's a whole series that I had in a show once where if you play them all together, it played like house music. But they were like music boxes. Of course, she's from Chicago. But then she has this whole other plethora and body of work, but I would look her up again, Sadie Woods. Lena Iris Victor, familiar with her. Truth, Myths, and Milestones. Pro tip, don't be fooled by a high price tag just because an artist is asking for a few $100,000 for an artwork. Doesn't mean their works are worth that. Inquire about former sales and look into their exhibition history. That's not questioning them, that's just doing your due diligence, right? Protect your neck, Wu-Tang. Chantel Martin, Heber Brantley. Totally have a crazy story about that. How I almost bought a piece of his artwork for $50 a couple years ago. And someone accidentally sold it because I didn't get a receipt. And now that same piece of artwork is worth $20,000. Next slide. So I got a refund, but I really just wanted that artwork. So, but years later, I did get a limited edition print in Chicago for The Revenge of Emmett Till, which is a film he did the artwork for and is featured in. So I wasn't too sad because there aren't any more of these. So another artist, David Anthony Geary, Chicago, Illinois. This is from his Great Migration series. Brittany Leanne Williams, a photo from her studio. She is awesome. Check her out. She's still reasonably priced by comparison. Acquisition is just the beginning. So basically when you're buying your your work for investment value, make sure you get your receipts, documentation, document it as much as you can, certificates of authenticity. And this is a reminder to myself also, because in the beginning I didn't do that, and I've been spending the past 2 years going back trying to get certificates of authenticity for work for artists that have now blown up, if you will. And it's really hard to get in contact with them and their people, and they ask a lot of questions and, stuff. So it's like best that you just get it all up front in the beginning. And my dad says, you can't really see it right now, but my dad always says the best lesson is a bought lesson. He was right. Lee Bullitt, Leonardo Benzant, and then now we get into the new now, next, and napalm, like the ones that are like blown up, you should know. And I always say, you should stack your coins in conversation, always have a couple of $100 aside for something, No one said that you had to, when it comes to collecting. Again, there's so many different ways to collect. There's a book, because they're first run editions of certain books and catalogs and magazines. And me personally, I collect artwork, but then also sculpture, but then also archival prints and material, artifacts. I have recently moved to Austin, as you know, and I'm just having this moment when I think about my movers bringing in hundreds and hundreds of pounds of books and magazines, and what it was like to go through all of them. But I was really happy to open all of those boxes. But, old books, first editions, vintage magazines, especially Black ephemera, that's some of my favorites. So old Ebonies and Jets and Negro Digest and others like that. So I keep those archives. And one of my collector mentors, good mentor, they're so wonderful to have, and it's not like you have to sit and talk every week, But just being able to experience someone else's collection that's matured can be truly inspiring, even if it's another artist that's just traded with other artists over time. And if you're an artist that trades with other artists, make sure you still get the certificate of authenticity and values as well. And so that was one of the things that, I've been talking to a lot of artist friends of mine about, because many of them have been trading for years and have these horizontal, like amazing, robust collections, you know what I mean? And I mean, think about in Chicago, right? The whole 1960s, whatever have you, Bill Walker, Elizabeth Catlett, the Black Art Renaissance, Dr. Margaret Burroughs, they were all classmates, right? They weren't looking vertically. These people were all classmates, or they were all peers. And the same thing is happening right now in Memphis. The same thing is happening right now in Chicago. The same thing is happening right now in Brooklyn. We are experiencing, particularly when it comes to contemporary art, we're talking about another renaissance of artists, and you can really just look horizontally for ways to trade upward. But make sure you get the document. So New Now Next, Brian Golden, Chicago, Illinois, Shani Crow, Lalu Sabanjo, Harmonia Rosales, and her story is really fun because literally, like she's from Chicago. Literally, it was, hadn't had a show in a little while, just private commissions. She does one piece, it goes viral online, not kidding. Like 3 weeks later, I'm on her IG, and like Samuel L. Jackson is like, I would like to inquire about how I can get one of your pieces or whatever, right? And I'm screenshotting, I'm like, girl, what, And then next thing you know, she's selling out, full shows in LA. She's doing this, she's doing that. It can happen pretty fast. Von Span, Yale MFA right now. He's definitely one to look up. Often you'll see him traveling. I think right now he's off somewhere with his wife and his little daughter, Harper. They're so cute. I keep up with them a lot. But I don't even remember how I found out about him, but I do remember traveling with my baby the youngest one, on a train to New Jersey, and went to his art studio when he was in school at Rutgers, just to meet him and to check out his studio. And then like 2 years later, maybe less, adding him to a show I did in Chicago. And then next thing you know, Yale MFA, all this good stuff. So, check them out. Don't be afraid of like young artists either. Don't be afraid of older artists. Great art is just great art, isn't it? Ferrari Shepherd. You may know him from a lot of different ways. I missed out on this one too, but the person who bought it, I was like, you go ahead and sell it to that guy. So Ferrari Shepherd, he's known a lot for, his writing, production. He's worked a lot with Mos Def and so forth and so on. But he's also a painter. And so this series he has going on with like Brain Salt and some other stuff I really like. Fabiola Jean-Louis, her reimagining history. James Nelson, I think I have 2 pictures of him in here. Max Sansing. Max Sansing, super cool dude, known for a long time. For a long time, he was the studio manager, not for Hebrew Brantley, but that's really more so to just show the connection of a lot of artists. They may be great in their own right and have their own skyrocketing careers, but then also still be in spaces of communication and collaboration with other greats. So these were some pieces that were from his first exhibition this past year at SOFA, another fair in Chicago. And what he did with this, and again, going back to these stories, was that I think he told me in the 80s or 90s, like Chicago got rid of all of these basketball goals around the city in like poor neighborhoods or inner city neighborhoods, because they said that the basketball courts were causing like loitering or violence or different things like that. And so what there ended up being, they took the goals or the nets, but they left the backboards. And so there were these deserted parks, with just these backboards. And interestingly enough, it just started to, as opposed to a place of play, turned into a place of loitering. And so he went and found like a lot of these abandoned, or unused backboards and turned them into pieces that I think are absolutely beautiful. If there are any left, I highly recommend getting them. But in general, Max Sansing, I get his work overall. Krista Franklin, collagist, to me, in a way, and cultural anthropologist, paper maker, studio museum, Chicago, all kinds of places. She's a really great intellectual reader, writer, Afrofuturist, and I highly recommend looking her up. And so here's a couple of people that are on the list. Some of them I mentioned, most of them I mentioned anyway, some of them I didn't. Happy to share them with you again. But this is just a short list. There's so many I cut from here because I didn't want to overload you. I really more so wanted you again to, really make up your own mind, and we could talk more about it because that was the fun part. I learned a lot about some of these people just from being around and out and about. It wasn't so much me just sitting in one place and deciding, okay, this one's hot, that one's not. This one's hot, that one's not. Because especially now, we live in a society where, whether it's because of the internet or whatever, there one post or one collector, or I remember Hebrew went from $4,000 pieces being his highest to when Jay-Z made the first acquisition of his work. But he was already being collected before then, silently. But then, right after that, then entire NBA teams are getting his artwork for Christmas gifts and, different things like that. And so all of the collecting that's happening with a lot of these artists, remember, is not always public. The internet is there is social media, but know that there is a whole layer of acquisitions that are happening that are not public, that are not visible. So don't take it just what's on the internet, as a law, as like proof of trend. Again, get to know the artist, talk to other people, use your community, and use your home. So this is a picture of my old place. It's somewhere. I found this picture in my phone today, which is like a mixture of before I got an art studio. I think there's like tarp on the floor, all kinds of stuff. But then you can see like two pieces from Fabiola Jean-Louis in the back. That's like altar stuff. But I had like a piece from Tasneem Baghdadi over there. She's in Germany. Her work's there. But the whole point is that my home, art is very much a part of what I consider to be like my charging zone or my sanctuary. It's not just these things that I own that cost me money, right? And I think that that's why I've always attracted some of the best work to me as a collector, because I really do care about art and think about my children and my family, my community when I purchase it. And so it feels good to go home and be around it. To be a student of Memphis, Tennessee, and the world above and around and below, of the art world, of art, of artists, of yourself within that microcosm, within that macrocosm, then I believe that, the art will not only become part of your home sanctuary, but it becomes part of the collective sanctuaries, that where we're able to communicate and educate each other, inspire each other, and thrive. And so with that, buy some art. No, seriously, buy some art. Thank you.